The Happytime murders takes place in a parallel universe Los Angeles where puppets coexist with humans. Well, I say coexist a little loosely. In reality, the puppets are kind of treated like second-class citizens. People beat them up, they're often the target of police raids, and they're just not taken seriously. Now, the plot centers around Phil Phillips, a private investigator and disgraced LAPD detective who was fired off the force after being betrayed by his partner, Connie Edwards, played by Melissa McCarthy. Basically, the scenario was another puppet was holding Connie hostage. Phil took a shot, missed, and in the process, an innocent puppet was killed. Now, also, some injuries resulted in a puppet liver being transplanted into Connie Edwards. And Edwards is now a bumbling sugar addict. Sugary substances being the equivalent of drugs in this universe for puppets. If you see any of the jokes involving syrup, there's some bits with pixie sticks and sprinkles and all sorts of things like that. However, the two get thrust back together when a series of murders takes place involving a sitcom called The Happytime Gang, which was a puppet-only sitcom except for one human. Now, it turns out that Phil's brother Larry was on the show and was a major character in it, as well as Jenny, the human, who was actually Phil's ex-girlfriend. Now, because of all of this and their connections to Phil, this has kind of led Phil to be something of a suspect. In the process of this, he's also dealing with another case involving a housewife named Sandra White, who is being blackmailed because she's also a bit of a sex addict. At one point, there's actually a sexual encounter between the two as the police are arriving for a morning briefing. Yeah. So, anyway, this movie is kind of... I got a little forewarned about this, that even though this was marketed as being a very sort of subversive, satirical look at things, that the satire really was not there. However, it is still fairly subversive in the sense that you have basically Sesame Street puppets going after, not acting like Sesame Street puppets, basically. Yeah, Greg the Bunny did this better. It did funnier, and it actually was satirical and subversive. Now, in the sense of this, it's a pretty by-the-numbers mystery, unfortunately. There's some decent banter between McCarthy and the puppet Phil, but it's rather lacking. Basically, if you haven't figured out, the big shock of shocks is that Sandra is the one behind the murders. She actually married Jenny, and in the process of this, there's a syndication deal for this show that's finally going through, and all of the puppets all the cast were stood to gain financially from this. However, if one of the cast members was dead and they weren't married or had any significant others, the pie would be greater for basically the share of the pie would be greater for the rest. And so Sandra married Jenny and basically is now killing everyone to try to reap all the reward. But there's actually another ulterior motive on top of that, which is that Sandra is the daughter of the innocent puppet that was killed by Phil in the accidental shooting. Now, if you've seen any of the other advertising, you might notice there's a prominent, sort of weird... I'm trying to figure out what type of creature to describe it. The puppet's name is Goomer, and in reality, Goomer is like, he's sort of this kind of, he's a member of the Happytime Gang who got really addicted to sugar products to the point that he's now this kind of babbling, like, crack addict type character. He's really barely in the movie. It looks like he plays a prominent role in the advertising. He really doesn't. In fact, shortly after he's interrogated by Melissa McCarthy's character, he's done away with. In fact, most of the supporting puppet characters in this are done away with rather quickly. Larry is Phil's brother, and he's the second puppet killed. The first puppet killed is this bunny character. And it's basically... the whole thing, this reason this exists is so we could do sex jokes about the Muppets. And you know what? The sitcom The Muppets actually did sex jokes about the Muppets better than this. This is directed by Brian Henson, Jim Henson's son. And I will say this, the puppetry is really good. In fact, during the end credits, there's a really cool sequence with the end, they're showing up. It was basically a making of featurette as the credits were rolling by. And you see the puppeteers are all in green screen suits so that you can see the puppets' full bodies moving instead of just, the Muppet where you just saw the upper torso most of the time. Like I said, that was actually really cool. The puppetry is really good. I would say, for the most part, McCarthy has some pretty good chemistry with the puppet characters. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of laughs in this. I laughed 3 times, and one was kind of funny where Bubbles, Maya Rudolph, basically explains in the film what happens to puppets in prison, which is their stuffing gets torn out and replaced with rice pilaf. And that was the one time I laughed, because I'm like, where did they get rice pilaf in the prison? The only other time I laughed was a physical scene where Melissa McCarthy's character tries to break down a door only to wind up hurting herself in the process. And that was really kind of it. None of the other jokes really stick. I did not have high hopes for this going in. I was probably the one who said, when I saw the trailer, and apologies for getting a little graphic here, but yeah, Phil and Sandra have a sex scene, and Phil climaxes and sprays like this weird shaving cream all over all over his office, and like I said, I just did not find that funny. Again, I just did not find this film very funny. It was not funny to me. I'm sorry. I wouldn't say it was boring. The mystery had me intrigued a little bit, because I started to suspect about halfway through, it's like, oh, I'm guessing, well, I figured out Sandra probably played a bigger role in this than it was. And Jenny seemed like the likely person to be in league with Sandra because she was the only human. And then, Jenny gets killed off, and kind of like, well, again, I probably keep that in mind. Oh, it turns out that, yes, they were actually together, and she was alive the whole time. And, yeah, so, because it's just a little too predictable. It's not particularly funny, like I said, and I know I'm getting repetitive. I'm sorry. I'm trying to be not so blow by blow during this. The sugar jokes don't really land, because I don't think the audience was entirely sure that, again, that this was supposed to be this way. But yeah, it's just the puppetry is good, and like I said, that's really the only thing I can say about this. Unfortunately, I do have to give the Happytime Murders an F.
There's something strange in the neighborhood.
So who you gonna call? Ghostbusters! Each sold separately.
Have no fear. Lanky, Seth, and Spengler are here. So are these ghosts. They've got ectoplasm. We've been goosed. Now what? Stay puft Marshmallow Man. Let's show this pile of dessert who's boss. Activating Chronoblaster. We ain't afraid of no ghosts.
Peter Venkman, Ectoplasm, Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, and other figures each sold separately. Ghostbusters, new from Kenner.
Okay, trailer time. And again, we got a nice kind of blending of old and new trailers in this. The first one up is Assassination Nation, which basically just looks like a scaled down high school version of The Purge, and yeah, it really didn't look that interesting at all. After that we have Nobody's Fool. Tyler Perry, I don't know if he directed it, but he produced it. His name is before the thing. Stars Tiffany Haddish, and it's about a woman who's a high-class professional woman whose sister is let out of jail, and it turns out that the high-class professional woman is in this sort of online relationship, but the sister deciphers that she's probably being catfished, and they set out for revenge. Also did not look very good. After that, we had Night School again, then Bad Times at the El Royale again. Then we had The Girl in the Spider's Web, the long-awaited sequel to Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, that was so long-awaited I guess they had to recast the character because it's not Rooney Mara. It's Claire Foy instead. After that, we had The Nun again. And then we had Second Act again. And rounding things off, we have Peppermint, which is Jennifer Garner is a woman whose family... Peppermint is Jennifer Garner, her husband and daughter are killed by a Mexican cartel, and she sets out for revenge. Yeah. So, like I said before, next movie is going to be The Nun. I'm taking a week off for the movie reviews. Let's see. Not this upcoming Sunday. The Sunday after that will be the Godzilla Awakening Random Trade Review. See you all then. Hey guys, is there a movie you want me to tackle? If it's some stinker like Baywatch or the Emoji Movie or something else, check out my Patreon at Sleepy Time for Cat Productions. See how you can make that happen.